I'm glad to see everybody's networking already. All right, so the next piece of our agenda here, this is one of my favorite parts. This is where we get to hear from each community about what's been going on. I asked a number of communities to come up and basically answer 3 questions. The first question is, what do you think your major accomplishments were over this last year? The second was, what are you currently working on? And the third is, next year at this conference, what do you want to be bragging about as an accomplishment? So what are your goals over the next year? We're going to go in alphabetical order, at least. So we're going to start with Anchorage and bring up Christy Duff from Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness.
First, I'd like to just say hello to everyone in the room. I am coming up on 2 months in the director position, and it's very exciting. There's a lot happening right now, and it's moving very quickly. So I know everyone here is eager to support housing and homelessness in the state of Alaska, and any information that I might be able to provide in the next few days, I'm happy to, and to get to know more of you. Right now, what we're working on, and Brian might have to remind me of how the 3 questions go in order, but one of our biggest successes, I would say, is rolling out the coordinated entry system in Anchorage. We started managing prioritization lists for single adults, transition-age youth, and families in January 2017. Brian gave the updates. As of the 10th, we had housed 99 single adults, 183 families, and 34 transition-age youth. That's either placements through our program, referrals, and also who we're tracking in terms of who's maybe self-resolved, relocated, or family reunification processes to lead to housing. We're currently, though, through this process, we've learned a lot. And in that, we're developing ways to make the program more effective. We're using that, or we're approaching this using HUD guidance as well as methods or approaches that are best for our community, one of which is developing additional prioritization criteria. So not only is someone's length of time homeless or chronic or literal housing status or their VI-SPDAT, that's used for prioritization, but in addition to that, another layer of vulnerability and needs. So we are targeting our most vulnerable populations and placing them in housing. We are also going through a process. We had 3 different prioritization lists. We are currently merging them into one. We've had some facilitated meetings with local experts as well as our housing providers to find the best way to merge those lists. It's an effort to offer fair and equal access to housing resources. Even though we were going through the process of housing, we realized working in the silos may have inadvertently been keeping people from accessing all of our housing resources. Our goals for next year, we have a couple that are very exciting. One, I want to see a better and more robust prevention and diversion program that we have in Anchorage. Right now, we focus really on the housing piece, but wraparound services in preventing or diverting families and individuals from ever reaching homelessness is very important, I think, in our community and something that we want to build out. Next is the Pay for Success program. It's a major grant. It's a combination from HUD and the Department of Justice, I believe. And getting the data we need and the resources together to use that as a demonstration project for single adults and housing in the community. Another one of our big goals is the Youth Demonstration Project. Brian mentioned that earlier. Covenant House is the lead agency. It is a coalition grant, and working to focus on youth homelessness and ending that in Anchorage and nationwide. And there's a third question that I'm forgetting?
Goals for next year.
Those were the goals, so I skipped question number 2, perhaps.
What are you currently working on?
We're doing that.
And what did you accomplish all year before?
Okay, maybe I answered them all. We're also working on Project Homeless Connect coming up for next year, and this was my first year in the COC NOFA process. And everyone who's been involved in that, I commend you, because that was a big learning curve for me.
I can definitely relate. When I started last year, the COC NOFA dropped on the first week of employment. that was a nightmare. Next, we're going to jump all the way to Fairbanks. Mike Sanders, the new Fairbanks Housing Homelessness Coalition coordinator. Come on up.
Hey, everybody. I actually brought notes, which those of you that have seen me speak before, you know this is pretty rare. So, all right, so Brian did have 3 questions, and the first question was, what are the few of the biggest successes in your community in the past year? And he had broken up into a coalition and in the community at large. So as Brian mentioned, I'm a brand new guy. You know, I've been doing this 8 months. But when I first got here, Kara Carlson, who was doing this position before me, and Kelvin Lee, the chair of the coalition, they both asked, they thought that the coalition needed to change a little bit. So we sat down and we got a strategic planning committee together. We developed a strategic plan using their 10-year plan and a SWOT analysis of the community. After that, we decided that we needed to change up our advisory board. We needed to get the key leaders here in town to be part of that board. So I went through and I started asking folks that I thought were the key leaders, and I'm pretty sure when I start reading off these names, you'll realize that we got the right folks. I got Brenda Stanfield, who I believe just walked in from Center for Nonviolent Living. Brenda, she walked back out already. She's quick. Got Rodney Gaskin in the back right there from the Fairbanks Rescue Mission. Got Shirley Lee from Housing First, from TCC's Housing First. And also, I've had a lot of people ask me about Housing First, why they're not on the tour. And Shirley was wanting to keep it kind of low key, but she is going to do a tour tomorrow at 10:30 for folks that are involved in Housing First models. So 10:30 at Housing First if you're looking for that. We got Jason Kempthorne. He's the executive director of the local Love Inc. Got Mary Lee Bates right there she's the executive director of Fairbanks Youth Advocates. We got Ed Bermudez. He's the executive director of Breadline. Kelvin Lee is the chair. He is the director of No Limits. He was in here. And our treasurer is Pete Penny. The other thing that we did is we moved our meetings. Our meetings were being held at the J.P. Jones Center. And we had, I went to one meeting there, and we had decent turnout. It was about 15 people. And then we moved it to City Hall. And moving it to City Hall, something changed. And suddenly we're getting, 30, 40, close to 50 people sometimes showing up for these meetings. And it's been pretty eye-opening. It's been great. We've had our capacity has been getting bigger by the day. Every month we're wondering about how we're going to do better than the month before. Some other coalition things that we've done is we now have a website. It's www.fairbankshomeless.org. We're now on the Facebook, and it's facebook.com/Fairbanks, whatever, blah, blah, blah. All right. I am not a social media guy. I think that stuff's kind of boring. All right. We've done, since last year, there's been 2 Project Homeless Connects. I've been involved in one, and the one was done before I got here. And so that's what the coalition's done. Now to the second part of that question was the community. What's the community done? This is really the important stuff. As far as I'm concerned, the coalition is just a tool for the community to use to get other stuff done. So there's a long list, and I'm probably gonna leave off some stuff, so I apologize. But we'll start with the Rescue Mission. The Rescue Mission is launching their Joshua community. Awesome idea. It's on Chena Ridge, or Chena Pump Road. It's going to be a pretty awesome ideal. It's sober living, permanent housing. They've also launched their 30-60-90 program, which is phenomenal. It's taken little goals and gradually building upon them all the way until the point where folks are getting housed. They had a gentleman just recently, who was in his 50s, who for the first time in his life went to his own apartment on his own, and that they're promoting that sort of independence. The SSVF Rapid Rehousing, phenomenal work. Glenna and Bernita. Glenna's right there, and Bernita's in here as well somewhere. But they're doing phenomenal work with their rapid rehousing. They had I want to say around 80% success rate. Is that correct? and that's keeping people in there. The Center for Nonviolent Living, they're about to open up yet another permanent supportive housing. That's going to be 3 permanent supportive housing programs that the Center for Nonviolent Living has. Love Inc., they're opening up their Loving Families project, and that's going to be getting families into a shelter together, and they're going to be moving from church to church. But during that time that they're moving from church to church, they're getting all of the help and support that they need to get them back into independence. TCC is about to open up a sobering center, which is going to be huge. It's one of the things that we definitely need here in town. It's a place where if somebody's inebriated, they can go get warmed up and hopefully get them away from their addiction. Our SOAP program has just moved to the Fairbanks Native Association, which is a huge deal. We're really happy about that. F&A Community Services, they're poised to start a housing program. And I was just talking to Amber. Amber was working out front earlier, and they're looking at possibly doing a rapid rehousing with that. The Stone's Throw program ran by Breadline. It's a job employment thing. It's for getting folks. It'll take them from being homeless to getting them certified as chefs. I mean, they're out there making a real living off of this program. It's a phenomenal program, and they're looking at expanding that. The Fairbanks Community Food Bank is potentially opening a food processing hub, which is going to be huge for this area. And the Fairbanks Youth Advocates have been doing some amazing outreach at the local libraries, and my understanding is that's been a real key to success. All right, so then the second question: what are your community's current priority work areas? Well, of course, coordinated entry is a huge thing, as you would imagine. And when I first got here, coordinated entry was a dirty word. I thought it was going to get me ran out of town, but now we have everybody on the data sharing agreement. That's good. We have one agency that's still a little passive aggressive on it, but they're gonna come around. And then we have another agency that, because of their a change in their grant, they have to wait before they can sign up. But we're looking at doing more permanent supportive and rapid rehousing, and our plan for that is we're having a Fairbanks Symposium on Homelessness on December 6th, and Scott Weiser has been the lead on that. And Scott is the bearded gentleman that was out front earlier. He's doing a phenomenal job with getting the symposium going, and Fairbanks Native Association has co-sponsored that with us now. And we also are hoping to get a day shelter at some point. And our third and final question: at next year's conference, what do you hope to report back as an accomplishment? Well, we're going to have coordinated entry up and going. It's going to be a success for all of Balance of State. I have no doubt in that. It's going to happen. And the symposium that I talked about, that's going to create some more permanent supportive and rapid rehousing programs here in Fairbanks. I'm certain those two things will happen. And that's it for us.
Thank you, Mike. Now we're going to jump to Juneau. Mandy Cole from AWARE, co-chair of the Juneau Coalition on Housing and Homelessness.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everybody. Juneau has been a busy place over the last year. I'm going to talk about housing first, which is kind of our biggest story, but I wanted to talk about a couple of other things that have happened in Juneau over the last 12 months. We added some sober transitional living beds at Gastineau Human Services. The Volunteers of America project worked on their phase 2 of affordable housing. We established a kind of really cool collaborative application for some local and statewide funding, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about where our coalition is right now. And we, I think, really exercised our public policy chops by advocating with this city and with Scott Chambor for some other policies related to housing and homelessness. So one of the things I think is the biggest accomplishment of this year is that our coalition is now so solid that we can take and evaluate and prioritize projects for funding, for collaborative opportunities, and it's something that hasn't always been the case. It's tough to get everybody, providers, consumers, the municipality into a room and really decide on what the priority is. And I feel like we've spent a lot of years building capacity and we're finally there. So we actually have discussions about who's going to go first in terms of funding opportunities, what projects are most needed in the community based on the data, and how we're going to support one another to move those projects forward first, which is it's a huge thing, I think, for a coalition, and it's really the purpose of our coalition is to kind of act with one voice. We are luckily currently advertising at the CBJ for a homeless coordinator, for a homeless services coordinator. So not only will we have Scott, but we'll have another person who is completely dedicated to our homelessness services and helping us with coordinated entry. We are also working on, okay, so there was a good side, bad side. If you want to hear the bad side, we had some legislation that passed, or an ordinance that passed in Juneau, prohibiting camping in a certain portion of the downtown corridor. And that was fairly painful for those of us who had spent a lot of time advocating and mobilizing folks who were sleeping on the streets to talk about why they were sleeping on the street. I think we got out a lot of good information by hearing from people about the stories that brought them to where they were and about how they felt safer sleeping in the downtown corridor in a doorway where there were lights than kind of pushed back out further into the woods. And I think those stories were super powerful. And even though we ended up still passing the ordinance, I think what it did was wake up a lot of people to what it means to be homeless. And as a result, I feel like the city has really embraced alternative strategies and the coalition as a source of expertise on what to do next. So the city established a homeless task force. One of the task force members is here. Norton Gregory can wave from the back. And we, as a coalition, provided some guidance as to strategies that might be helpful in prevention and addressing kind of longer term problems. As a result of that, there were several recommendations that the task force made to the Assembly. We're going to have an overnight warming center established this winter using the staff of existing service providers, so we're not trying to kind of remake the wheel. We're using the bounty that we already have in terms of personnel and expertise to really help keep people warm. But more than that, we're looking at long-term strategies. So the Assembly is now looking at other types of housing first strategies, scattered site housing first, assertive community treatments, and other ways that we can help keep people off the street and really tackle the problem, not just in the moment, but for the future. Housing first. This is kind of our best success story, I think. Housing First just opened in September, our Juneau Collaborative Housing First facility, with support from the city, with support from the federal government, with support from foundations, local and statewide, and with the support of our faith community and just kind of regular old folks in Juneau. And I think we are the second in the nation, maybe first in Alaska, where we'll have a co-located primary and behavioral health clinic on site with our Housing First project. So we're really, really excited about that. That project took a lot to get off the ground, and that brings me to kind of one of the things we want to be working on in the future. Brian noted in his remarks that we have a need for a funders collaborative, and I can tell you that after building a supportive transitional facility for AWARE, which is the agency I work for, and then being part of the Housing First board, I can tell you that 7 years, 10 years, 5 years to get an idea that is best practice, that makes sense economically, and that will save people's lives, it's too long. We shouldn't have to wait that long in order to make something like that happen. And one of the biggest issues is just how complicated it is in this day and age to get that funding package together. And so if it takes Scott Chamber 5 years to build a Housing First facility, the rest of us need help and we need expertise. And I think a funders collaborative is a way to go, because one of the biggest challenges is not just whether the money is there, but how to layer them together, where to go first, where to go second, and who needs to be on board before the next person will sign on. It's a kind of political and economic dance that doesn't make sense for us, and it doesn't make sense for our participants. So that's my main message. We are also kind of future projects in Juneau. We're looking at a detox center that transfers directly to treatment. How many of you have difficulty getting your participants into treatment, even if they really want it? Yeah. So one of the things that I think as a coalition we can use our newly found power to really advocate connections between substance abuse treatment providers and housing and homelessness service providers, because a lot of our folks really need those services and they've always been pretty separate. So I think that's about it. I very much appreciate your time, and thank you for letting me talk about Juneau.
All right, now we're going to move to the Kenai Peninsula. I believe Catherine DeLacy is going to give this update.
Hello. The Kenai Peninsula Continuum of Care encompasses all of the Kenai Peninsula. It's about 25,000 plus square miles and 55,000 people. And so it's a challenge, to say the least. And I've come to believe it's a time game. You just keep at it, keep at it. I would say some of our successes have been the Project Homeless Connects. I would admit the first year, 8 years ago, my agency hosted it, and I thought it was just a mandate from HUD, and we're just going to do this nice thing. It has singly done the most for community awareness in our area. And it's the first time ever that I've had too many volunteers and we have to restrict volunteers. It just doesn't happen that way. So it's been a real blessing. And it's carried over to the continuum. People that were involved with the Project Homeless Connect, as in a reentry with Jody, have come to the continuum too. So it's been very good. And it didn't cost anything much. Our successes this year have been really wonderful, passionate things that have happened in our community. There are 3 women, because of their passion, their involvement with behavioral health and treatment, have opened facilities. There is a Freedom House for women coming out of prison and treatment that is 9 beds, give an opportunity just to transition back into the community and assist with their employment and housing. And my agency, Love Inc., is also involved with that. Indigo House is just a recovery housing for really parents primarily. I believe they're men and women, and they are given opportunity to reunify with their children in a atmosphere of wanting to get clean and stay clean. And Nukutan is a transitional housing for men. Again, it's a sober living facility for men coming out of corrections or treatment. And all of these just were people in my community that were just really passionate about this arena, and they took a big step and went out to the community and did it. It's been a wonderful thing to see. I mean, we never have enough housing, so, and these are, of course, hard people to find housing for. Love Inc.'s been in housing for 9 years now, and we, as everybody knows, don't have enough housing. That's really kind of our successes. I think the continuum is trying to look always at affordable housing and what we can do. We also have a situation, since we're a second-class borough, we have no emergency shelters. And while it would be wonderful to put everybody in permanent housing first, sometimes that's almost a month, 2-month, 3-month process. And so I really think those are the two areas. As far as what I'd like to report, we're working on coordinated entry, and Sherry Smith, who has formerly hosted the Continuum, has been drafting things for us so that we can put this on paper. For as long as I've been on the Kenai, which is about 35 years, we do coordinate. We just didn't put it on paper. When I first heard coordinated entry, it really kind of was overwhelming. But really, it's just what we do anyway. And we're always checking because there's never enough money. And so for the future, what I'd love to be able to announce next year is that we have the coordinated entry in place, that we could achieve some kind of emergency shelter on the Kenai Peninsula. It's I really like Nome with its weather activation, and I believe the churches in my area, what's happening is over the 8 years we've been talking about housing, it's starting to be less scary for people, I think. And the churches are also, like in Fairbanks, thinking, well, a week isn't so long to take in people to keep them safe. So I hope that's what I can report next year. And that's what's happening on the Kenai.
Okay, next we're going to jump to Ketchikan. Evelyn's going to come up.
Every time I go to a group, I'm told I'm supposed to ask. So I'm not afraid to stand before all of you and say, if you have any extra money, we would be delighted in Ketchikan to have that. And let me tell you the reasons why, and let me brag a little bit about what's happening in Ketchikan. Number one, I am delighted to know that coalitions can work. I've been enthused already with the hope and the possibility that Ketchikan can have a coalition that works. Our coalition went on hiatus about 4 years ago because it wasn't working. And I don't need to go into the frustration of that, you already know. But as of last year, we in Ketchikan are delighted to say that we see a glimmer between the clouds and the rainstorms, that yes, even though we have been functioning individually, we really haven't been independent, because we live in a very small community that has caused us to cross paths. We all share people, and we all are now beginning to say, we have established ourselves in our separate agencies, and now it is time for us to start segueing and coming together in a fashion that can address this big monster in the room, housing first, whatever that is. Because as you know, Ketchikan is 36 miles long, 7 blocks wide, and there isn't housing. So I'm Evelyn Erbele, and I represent First City Homeless Services. First City Homeless Services was organized in 2009 because we recognized there was a segment of our population that was not being served, and that is the chronic inebriate, chronic homeless, chronically drug addicted. Yes, we have a night shelter, but you have to blow to get in it, and you cannot, most of these individuals, receive admittance into that shelter. We have Love in Action that is now developing a program for housing first. They're looking now to expand, to find a facility where they can put in apartments for families, also move their office and all of their ministry into one facility. But First City Homeless Services' main purpose is to keep people alive. In 2015, we had 4 people fall in the water. that didn't mobilize our government agencies. What mobilized our government agencies to finally decide that homelessness is an issue was the benches in front of the museum, because the homeless people were sitting on them when the tourists were in town. And the government decided this is not good for the image of Ketchikan. And it is only out of that demand to remove the benches so that we would move the homeless people out of downtown that now we have some government concern, be it false concern, but at least an interest. We don't have a mobilized coalition, but by howdy do we have a community that supports us 100%. First City Homeless Services opened a day shelter with banker's hours and no money. We are now 7 days a week, 9 years later, serving breakfast 7 days a week. Yeah, it's leftovers from Safeway and IGA and the other stores. We apply for grants. We're peddling, looking for money just like you. But a year ago, because of those 4 individuals falling in the ocean, we decided to open a pilot program of an overnight warming center. We started in November. We went to March 31, 100% volunteer staffed. This year, First City Homeless Services, at the good graces of the city of Ketchikan, received money to hire individuals to open up the warming center in the same place that the day shelter meets. I have all of the numbers to show you and to brag about, but we've been open since October 1, and we've already had in the facility 34 individuals over 100 times. Is there homelessness in Ketchikan? Yes. Is there this marginal community of people who are not going to find employment and who are not going to find housing? Yes. And that is the purpose and the sole purpose of First City Homeless Services, is to keep people alive. We're encouraged by the reports of everyone that has talked to us about coalitions and how they can segue and how they can come together, because that's where we're at right now. The Ketchikan Wellness Coalition Task Force on Homelessness has a Vista AmeriCorps, Ashley, who is here. We, First City Homeless Services, have, as of January 1, an American Vista working for First City Homeless Services, and these 2 young women, and this is the thrill for us, because notice the color of my hair. We have a very active volunteer board with hair the color of mine. Radiant as I may be, I'm not going to be here forever, and I know Ashley is the next generation, and we are seriously seeking out young individuals with a passion to address the crises that's in Ketchikan. At the end of a year, Ashley and Arizona will have a comprehensive report to make to the city and to use for the sole purpose of proving to our community and giving not only statistics but also encouraging us in how we can best serve the men and the women that you probably would never employ and you probably would never offer housing to. So how are we going to best care for one another in our community of Ketchikan? Immediate housing is what we do. And now that we have received Park Avenue temporary home, it's for men and women who are homeless, but they have to blow to get in there at 5 o'clock at night. And if you're not there by 5 o'clock at night, you won't be in that shelter. That's not the population of people who come to the day shelter. You have Love in Action, who serves the marginally housed, marginally employed, and keeps them in their housing and helps to keep them in their positions. That's not who First City Homeless Services is. First City Homeless Services sees the men and the women who are chronically in a state of disrepair. Whether it's from drugs or alcohol, we are not a dry shelter. The police bring people to First City Homeless Services to sleep it off during the day and at night. The overnight warming center is not a dry shelter. Men and women can walk in from 8 to 10 o'clock. The door locks at 10 o'clock for walk-ins. After 10 o'clock, the police, emergency services, the emergency room, and Women in Safe Home can bring or refer men and women to the overnight warming center. You can be as intoxicated as necessary for you to cope with your life, but you cannot be harmful to yourself or to anyone else in our facility. Transitional housing will come. It is one of our future expectations and our future goals. But in the meantime, we view ourselves, First City Homeless Services, as an emergency stopgap, offering not what our ethic would want to offer, not what morally should be right, but minimal standards for survival. A place to come to get out of the weather and to sleep on the floor. Because we don't have a sprinkler system, we learn that we can't offer any accoutrements for sleeping. We can't offer you a pillow, a pad, a piece of cardboard. So you sleep on the floor. We keep the heat up, but you still sleep on the floor. Doesn't bless my heart to have someone sleeping on the floor, but it is the minimal standard that we are able to offer right now. Going into the future, as a result of the AmeriCorps documents and evidence that they will produce, next year we'll be able to come here and say, we're offering mats this year. We're offering pillows this year. We have a vision that there will be men and women from the different organizations sitting around a table actually talking about a future plan. That's our goal, that's our hope, and that's our desire. Please come to Ketchikan. We need your expertise and your desire to enter into relationship with us on a state basis so that we together can say, yes, there are men and women who face homelessness, and we're going to do the best effort we can to make that go away. Thank you.
Evelyn is one of my favorites. Do we have Dana Myers here from Kodiak? Yeah, come on up, Dana.
Hello, everybody. So I'm with Brother Francis Shelter in Kodiak and the Homeless Coalition Coordinator. Big successes this year. The Women's Crisis Center was able to add a whole house, and so they can now house 24 individuals. They do the most of our family sheltering. The prevention and placement services remain robust. We helped 280 families with prevention and placement last year. And Kodiak Area Mentor Program continues to grow. They are a pilot program, outreach to work with people dealing with justice issues. And they coordinate with the shelters and the jail. They do letter writing when people are over here in Anchorage doing their time, and then they help them reintegrate to the community when they get back. We have had 0 deaths due to exposure this year. We hope that remains. Currently, as a coalition, we're hoping to just hold our ground. We know that there's a lot of budget issues. We've lost some funding on the local level, and we're concerned about the state funding issues as well. We also hope to improve point-in-time count participation. And next year, we actually do have a housing project going up. We lost a few housing units. I think it was 130 at last count over the past few years. And we're hoping to gain 20 small 1 and 2 bedroom units. And they are going to have some housing first and special needs priority. And they are hoping to break ground this month. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. How about Shawn Gilman from Kotzebue? Shawn, yep. All right, Shawn.
Sorry, I'm really short. Thanks, everybody, for having me here today, along with other fellow people from Kotzebue. We're really new to the homeless situation, and the need was identified of finding people sleeping in connexes and in shacks, and as Brian pointed out, some of the pictures that were seen earlier today. So a group of very concerned citizens came together last year, and with the help of the Northwest Inupiat Housing Authority, we were able to provide nighttime shelter for those people in need. Since then, we've worked very hard to become a very formal, organized group, and that has been accomplished through the collaborative efforts of the City of Kotzebue, the Northwest Housing Authority, the Native Village of Kotzebue, NANA, am I missing anybody on here? Manilik Hospital. All of us have come together and formed a board and have put together plans and are working really hard toward coming up with permanent long-term solutions to those people who are in need. Some of our biggest accomplishments were actually opening up this year and for a partial year last year. The community priorities is for us to continue to expand what we have and offer more for the people in need and offer long-term solutions. We had some great success stories this year with 2 of the individuals that were regular to the shelter that went and gained gainful employment. They used that shelter as a place to sleep and be able to go to work in the morning. So that's fantastic, and that's what it's all about. So next year, we hope that we can report some success stories, the expansion of our program, create long-term plans with solutions, find existing resources and additional resources to help expand what we have. I don't know if many of you know a lot about Kotzebue, but it's a regional hub for 11 communities with just over 8,000 people served in that area. It's not quite as large as some of the other groups that are here, but we were at capacity almost every night that we were open. So that shows there's a big problem in that area. So we hope that we can be a part of that solution. We do have some current services for women and children in Kotzebue, but that's, this is a growing concern, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to be successful in addressing that. Thank you.
All right, Dave Rose from Matsu Coalition on Housing and Homelessness.
Good morning. Thank you for your participation in the conference today and tomorrow. It's greatly appreciated and even more greatly needed. I've been in, not the business, but in the field helping with housing and homelessness now for, I think, like 8 years. And this conference and the national conference of the Alliance to End Homelessness, these are the places where we get new ideas. This is the place where we get networked. This is where we get encouraged. And I want to, again, thank you for being here. All the reports so far have been awesome. It's been great to hear from you. It's been great to jot down some notes. And again, we'll network with you in a little bit. Brian put me toward the end because he wanted to see how much time there was left, because he knows I tend to go on and on. So I'm going to try not to do that. But I have to tell you, if you haven't done so already, ask Zach at ICA to put together a graphic for you with your data. This is the data of what we've done with our BHAP funds over the last fiscal year. Much easier to explain to people what's going on. And if you haven't already, get together with the folks from 4Acre and put together a vision, put together a strategic plan. Get down on paper what it is you really, really, really are there to do. We did that with 4Acre, and it's extremely helpful with putting together grants, because they all ask those questions. If you've already got it thought out and put down as a community, it can be extremely helpful. And then, what have we done in the last year? I've heard it repeated time and time again. The Homeless Connect, the point in time count, not only does it give you good data, and this is our data sheet from that, but it also connects your community two ways. The people who need the help hear that there's somebody who could maybe help them, and they come. The people who are out there helping, but they're not sure how to connect with the people in need, love it, because the people who are in need come and just walk around and get to know them. At least at our Connect, that's how it works. And I would encourage you, if you haven't already tried to do a Project Homeless Connect, just start small and do it. It helps with your point in time count, which is, again, the data that we all need for our grants and that type of thing. So, Brian, what have we done in the last year that's been a good thing? It's all right here. And I'm going to take my 11-page report now and attempt to bring it down to just 2 or 3 minutes. We have issue area priorities. We have senior housing, we got prisoner reentry, we have homeless youth, we have affordable low-income housing, we have special needs housing, homeless precursors, and, of course, data. All of this are specific special areas that we're focused on. We, this last year when we went to the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference, we had a great meeting with Representative Young, Senators Murkowski, and Senator Sullivan. And in Representative Young's office, he said not once, not twice, but 3 times that wouldn't it be great if somebody found a way to use those connexes so people could live them as housing? Because I think that's the way to go. He said it the second time and then the third time. And Ketchikan, where's Ketchikan again? Okay, and where's Kotzebue? Yeah, he specifically said, I know there's a bunch of them in Kotzebue. And he's right, they're all over the place. My son lives in Kotzebue, and I know that most of them are claimed already. But anyway, the third time he said, you could make houses out of those containers, couldn't you? I stopped and I said, Representative, we take that challenge. So one of the things we've done this past year is we've started the ball rolling with the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, and we're going to come up with a proposal on how to take connexes, turn them into tiny homes, if you will, and have them as safe, affordable, warm, and hopefully attractive homes for people who don't have housing. Not the retirement home, not the dream home, not the vacation home, but the one that's warm and safe and sustainable. So that's one thing we're working on and going to continue to work on. I have to mention Valley Residential Services this past year. They have expanded housing, and they are doing an awesome job. By 2018, they're going to have close to 284 affordable housing units for folks. And they are making especially good inroads in the area of senior housing. because that's a huge need in the valley. We call it the, well, we didn't coin it, but it's a silver tsunami in the valley. So those of you who are headed that way with me, hopefully we'll be providing housing for ourselves down the road. We've also been excited this last year. We continued to work with and increase the outreach of our Mat-Su Reentry Center and Reentry Coalition. They've hired another full-time case manager now and are going into our local, actually it's all of ours, correctional facility, Goose Creek, and working on identifying the folks coming back to the Mat-Su Valley and helping them with a plan for housing through us, as well as other support services, so that they'll stay out of Goose Creek housing and maybe in their own safe, sustainable housing in the valley. Let's see. Oh, we also have had 2 landlord luncheons. You ever have a luncheon for somebody to honor them? Have you ever heard of somebody doing that for landlords? No. We did it. This is one of those ideas that we picked up at the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference 3 years ago. And this last year we did 2 of them. And we did them because we need more landlords. We don't have a lot of public housing per se. We have some, but not a lot. But we have a ton of 4plexes and 6plexes in the Mat-Su Valley that are owned by people who have taken their retirement money, invested it into a 4plex, and hoping that that'll help them supplement their income over the years. Well, a lot of those folks are good, caring folks. And if we can help them understand that if they take a chance on this person or help this family, and we'll stand alongside them, it opens up apartments. It opens up 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom and 3-bedroom apartments, and it expands our affordable housing options. Landlord luncheons, you might want to think about doing that. Oh, and then John Weaver at Valley Residential Services called up and said, hey, I'm going to open this idea up to everybody. What do you guys think? We're going to do an affordable housing tour. The local folks in Governor Murkowski's office and Sullivan's office and governor's office and our local, we call them the politicos, they're also the people with the money, asked if they could, if we could show them what we do in the valley. What's this thing called affordable housing? So we got them all together, invited our operating board members to show off their programs, and we took a tour of Wasilla and then a tour of Palmer. And then we stopped at one of our partners, Kinnick Tribal Council, on the way back and had lunch. And the whole way we're talking about housing. And I told John, I said, hold it, I have one concern. If we show off everything we're doing, which we're very proud of, they're going to go away thinking, oh, they got it covered. And the truth is we don't. And John said, don't worry, we'll take care of that. Sure enough, at the end of the tour, one of the representative, Murkowski didn't come, it was their staff. Anyway, one of the staff members said, oh, so if you guys are able to maintain the growth that you have going right now, with the units that you have right now, you'll be okay, right? And I thought, oh no, they didn't get the message. And John, in his quiet and very helpful way, said, no, let me make this clear. We need 500 more units over the next 5 years. Right now, we're at 250. So, no, we will not be okay. We're still scratching at the surface and trying to make some progress. We will not be okay. And that was the last thing those folks heard, along with our piles of paperwork. It was awesome. If you want a way to get other folks involved, call them up and say, hey, you got an afternoon? If you're a small community, jump in your car, their car, and just drive around and say, this is what I'm talking about over here. You already know about this. They're sleeping on the street corners or in the doorways or on the benches. This is what really, really works. This is permanent supportive housing. And we need to somehow increase this so it meets this. But I wanted you to know what works, but I wanted you, again, to realize that this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect these folks with need with these folks with resources. I could brag about Project Homeless Connect. I'm not going to do that because I think I'm running out of time. But I will brag that our BHAP grant, since its inception, has had a 90% success rate. 90%. And that's because of our case managers. That's because of our individual agencies doing follow-up, making sure the initial need was met, and that it's sustainable and moves along. It also is because of our relationship with the Job Center. We've got folks there specifically welcome our people at the door if they know they're coming in for housing needs and employment to make their housing sustainable. Use those resources if you have those in your community. Partner with those guys because they're there with a resource looking at how to best serve the need. How am I doing? Really well. Really? Good. I've got 2 or 3 more things then. The most recent thing we did, and this was literally last week. So how many of you have churches in your community? This is interaction time. How many of you have churches in your community? Okay, that's more appropriate. How many of you have faith-based groups in your community? Okay, good. Go to them. Talk to them. Tell them what you're doing. Ask them to support you in prayer if one of their tenets is prayer. Because I'll tell you what, they're supposed to be doing what we're doing. Okay? And they want to. They really do. They really want to. But they don't know how to go about it. Or they're scared by it. Or they have 2 or 3 congregants who are saying, oh, don't go that way. I remember a church that did that once, and man, there were people dressed goofy coming from all over the place. Don't go that way. We'll lose our security. Don't go that way. Who knows what will happen to our building? Well, the truth is, if you do go that way, it's a blessing for everybody. It really is a blessing for everybody. And here's the idea that I hope I'll report on in 2018 that worked. I'm challenging every faith-based group I come to get into the landlord business. Every one of them. And you want to know why? They've got the volunteer personnel. If they catch the idea, they catch the vision, they can make it happen. Number 2, many of them have the resources already. They've got the money, or they have access to the money, or they know who to go ask for the money. And then number 3, it's already a part of their mission. It's already a part of who they are. And and number 4, and I love this part. I tell them at the end, and you know what? You can even make money off this. And the treasurer in the church goes, hold it. He said I could make money. What's going on here? Because they're looking for resources too, let's be honest. They're looking for resources too. If you buy a fourplex and you get an okay deal on it, you can finance it. You can then rent out the 4 rooms, or the 8 rooms if it's 2 bedrooms in each one. You can rent them to low-income folks and still pay the mortgage and pay the insurance and pay the interest on the mortgage. And you know what? You'll have money left over for maintenance. This is charging below average housing rental rates. And if you get the church then to do the maintenance, because you got 3 or 4 volunteers who are wondering, well, what do I do with my time? Well, ask the guys, and this is sexist, I'll admit it, but it's real. Ask the guys, hey, I got a project, the fourplex needs the furnace cleaned. I got a project, the fourplex needs the grass cut. I've got a project, the fourplex needs the windows cleaned. I've got a project, the fourplex, the furnace isn't quite working right. Oh, no problem, I can do that, put it on my to-do list, boom, it's done. The money you save in the maintenance through the volunteers is now money you can reinvest in another fourplex. You're going to end up making affordable housing happen through the community. We've got a couple of churches looking into it in the Mat-Su Valley. I'm so excited. I hope that in 2018, I will be reporting that that worked out very well. Okay, all right. Because we can't do what we do without some kind of financing, without some kind of support, I better just give a shout out to the Mat-Su Health Foundation. They support what we do, and we are just so fortunate to have that kind of a foundation in our valley. United Way of Mat-Su also helps out a great deal with what we do. Of course, Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, if we didn't have them and we didn't have the funds coming through for the Homeless Assistance Program, the Emergency Solutions Grant, the Continuum of Care funding for all of what they do, we wouldn't be able to continue either. And then the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority. All of these organizations feed in dollars because they want us to continue helping meet needs with resources. Thank you very much.
Okay, one more before lunch. Sue Steinacker from Nome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Okay, I'll try to be brief. In the past, I have represented Nome in an effort to build a Nome housing coalition. I didn't get very far because the Nome Emergency Shelter Team, or NEST, was the only housing provider of any sort of homeless provider in our community. So it finally dawned on me that we needed to reach out broader than that. And it also occurs to me that so much of what drives our challenges in Nome is because of the challenges that our villages are facing. And so we have now pulled in the Regional Housing Authority and asked them to be part of our coalition, and the same person is running for this coalition. I highly recommend Chris Kolarok, because I don't see how we can be working within our communities without including our villages, because they're integrated into the issues that we're dealing with. Nome is a community of 3,800 in a region of about 10,000. And when I first started presenting here, we were just starting the Nest Shelter. And as someone mentioned, we were driven, our first 2 winters was entirely with volunteers. We were only opening at 20 below zero and colder, and still were open between 60 and 70 nights, but because we were doing it with a complete volunteer staff. It launched Nest, but it was unsustainable. We had to discover funds, and we hadn't a clue. It's important for those more experienced in the housing world to understand that these smaller communities don't have a clue what's out there. I still don't remember how we found out about BHAP, and it was a complete side conversation that turned me on to the community initiatives matching grants. And those are still the only 2 we really know about. So I just want to say we're getting closer to building a coalition, but we are pulling in regional players because they're very much a part of the problems we're trying to solve. One of the great things that happened this year was Brian Wilson, just Brian getting involved. And then he came to Nome, and he didn't just do a day trip. He spent 3 days in our region, 2 nights in Nome. I found him down on the seawall the next day smoking cigarettes with our local inebriates. He is terrific. Well, we knew more. He knew people by first name basis the next day. But then he went on to Savunga. I mean, he told me Nome was an eye-opener for him. He'd been in the state several years. He'd been with the coalition for over a year, and Nome was an eye-opener when he saw the cost of housing because of the complete lack of housing stock and the poor quality of housing, and how people are having to double and triple up in order to have housing. But then we went to Savunga, and that blew him away. And I just think that this is so important to any effort, even in Anchorage, to understand what is happening in our villages. And Chris Kolarok is here today, as is Delbert Pangawi from Savunga, and they will speak tomorrow on the panel and try to give you statistics that I won't take your time for right now. Put a mic in front of me, and all of a sudden I find I have a lot more to say than I thought I did. I'm sorry. But another thing to me that I have been struggling with, and Brian gets it now, having made these visits, is the point in time count. And that's because in Northwest and Northern Alaska, people are not going to leave families out in the cold because they will freeze to death. And so we don't have couch surfing. That's a rude term when you have 21 people in a small 3-bedroom house with no closets. So Brian gets this, and that there are people living in houses that maybe really don't even qualify as appropriate for human habitation. And he's taken those issues to HUD, and HUD is coming back with some suggestions as to how we can more accurately really identify the truly homeless in Alaska. And those numbers will change the point in time count tremendously. And I think that any plan to address homelessness in the state has got to include these rural numbers, or we haven't correctly identified the problem. So that is some effort that we've been making in Nome, and it's why we have more people from Nome here. We're having a better meeting here than we're able to pull off in Nome, and we've got people from Kotzebue and Bethel, and I'm so excited to learn about these other programs. 10 years Nest has been running, and I never knew that Ketchikan had been doing a wet shelter for 10 years. So we obviously need to do a lot more communicating, and I hope this conference is a real beginning to that, and for us smaller communities to figure out how to engage. We've been doing a tiny little Housing First permanent supportive project using money from Alaska Mental Health Trust and the hospital. We have a triplex, and we have been putting behavioral health clients coming out of homelessness, addressing their addictions into this housing project. Now we finally are getting some COC funds. Holy smokes, is that ever a grant challenge to to people who have not done this before. So the COC funds will enable us to keep this going and pick up 2 additional units. And I've got a family that meets the qualifications, but I can't find an apartment for them. So I'm housing them in a 1-room in a hotel for 2 months now with a 5-year-old. So we really have a housing stock problem. The other problem is that the homeless in our area, and those really, we've got the near homeless, but a lot of them, it's driven by alcoholism. We don't have a residential treatment program, and to get people housed in a small community where their reputation is known into a scatter site is very, very difficult. The fact that I've got that triplex at all has been sort of a miracle. So I'm still struggling with that maybe now I've got some of the money, but I can't find the places. One of the biggest problems that is causing us to really function more as a coalition in Nome has been the significant increase in homeless inebriates. And because it is happening on Front Street, just like in Ketchikan, this has finally engaged the city. They have given the shelter money, but now they see the problem is in their hands as well. And so Nest and others are trying to work with the city, with the police department, with the hospital, to figure out what we can as a small community do to address the numbers of people that are homeless and inebriated on our streets. And this has been reflected in our shelter numbers. When we first started the shelter, we averaged 9 to 12 people a night. And now, last winter, and we also were temperature driven. We are no longer, thanks to grants and local donations, we are open 12 hours a night from November 1st to May 1st. That's our winter season. And so last winter, the shelter was open 188 nights. It served 235 individuals filling a total of 3,996 bed nights. This is in a community of 3,800 people, and with the help of 7 churches, those people were all served dinner and breakfast. But our numbers have just, again, we were set up never expecting more than 20. Last winter, there were 27 nights where we had more than 30 and a high of 38. And 99% of these folks are inebriated, and we have 2 monitors. So we have exceeded our capacity, and we are heading into another winter season and trying to, as a very small community with a municipality with not much money, trying to figure out how we're going to address this. Part of the problem we have is that if we send somebody who is disruptive and ill-behaved out of the shelter, they stand the chance of freezing to death. And our whole shelter started as an effort to stop that. But because we don't have a jail, and of Senate Bill 91, if we call the police to the shelter, so we don't throw people out, we have them arrested. We've learned how to do citizen reports, citizens arrest reports. And the police no longer really want to take them because all they can do is take them to the correctional center, who can no longer accept people on a disorderly conduct. So they do the paperwork to get in, they do the paperwork to get out, and they're back at the shelter. And this is some of the struggles that a small community is dealing with. I did come and look at Anchorage's system, where you can be inebriated but well-behaved and get into Brother Francis, but the more severely inebriated go to the sleep-off center, but they can still have the disruptive inebriated taken to jail, which is not an option that we currently have. Okay, on a happier note, we did bring a low-income, we're working on a low-income housing tax credit project for Nome, something that took years to even learn existed. And the local tribe has stepped up as the sponsor. The Regional Housing Authority is there kind of backing them up. We have been through public meetings, and we have a proposal that's we're approaching we've been accepted into the next round, so we will be submitting a proposal here in another couple of weeks. So I would like to report for next year, that maybe we will have a low-income housing tax credit project in construction. If not, I can report that we will have a much better proposal for a low-income housing tax credit project. But even if built, the cost of construction in rural Alaska, the further north you go, becomes astronomical. We could only afford to ask for a 14-unit family-type project. We have 55 families currently on the wait list for the 33 Alaska Housing Finance affordable homes. So even 14 units is just a tip of the iceberg as far as what the need is, and that's just in Nome. Tomorrow you'll learn even how much greater the need is in the villages. And I think that, here's an idea I had. I've been so intimidated when I listen to Scott or listen to others, that communities that have figured so much of this out. And I want to suggest that maybe you mentor a small community trying to get off the ground, or trying to figure out what these funding streams are, how to put them together. How can you help us with what you've learned, because we lack the capacity. And in closing, my hope for next year is that maybe next year it won't be me presenting. I'm even more silver than Evelyn. That what I hope is that Nome will have, at least for the first time ever, one full-time position dedicated to addressing our housing and homelessness needs, and heading up an engaged coalition. So maybe I won't see you next year, but I probably will. Thank you very much.